Hello, 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 beautiful unicorns. Welcome back to yet another incredible episode. And I say incredible because I know that all of them are. Um, and today we wanted to talk about working through guilt and shame as adults. And of course, we will mention the children in here as well because we as adults are actually we are all children that have not learned a lot of, you know, uh, the healthy ways of living and being and existing and coexisting and most importantly, healing. Because what Bethany and I were just talking about is um, stress and anxiety. I guess that can also be part of this topic: guilt, shame, stress, and anxiety. Um, I'm going to write it down. And anxiety. And I didn't even know how to spell anxiety until I learned that I had it myself and what it was that I was living with. And then it took me a couple of tries to actually spell it right without Googling it, without autocorrect. So what we were talking about is children. And that's what led into this conversation to this topic where as children and now as adults, we all have situations and experiences where we experience stress or higher levels of stress and anxiety that can cause a system, our body, to react a certain way, but none of us were taught to pay attention to the signs. So, what started this conversation was children, kids peeing their beds at night. My son, he's 7 years old, and once in a while, usually it's maybe once a week or sometimes once a month, he would pee in his bed at night. And he used to pee in his bed every single night religiously. And so what I did is, and here's the thing, this is the reason why I believe that it's fairly normal, but at the same time, I needed to understand why this was happening with my son without blaming myself for it. And I was blaming myself for it, saying that because I peed my bed until I was 13 years old. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. As a teenager, I would have been. Now I'm not because I understand why. I've learned why. And it has something to do with stress, anxiety, guilt, and shame, right? So I'll give you an example of a bedtime routine, and then you'll probably understand why this child would end up peeing at night. So it's bedtime and you find yourself yelling at your kid or raising your voice or feeling angry and stressed yourself, or why don't you listen to me, it's bedtime, let's go brush your teeth, sit down, just listen to the book, I'm reading your book, I'm spending my time with you and you don't want to do it. So why do I even bother? You know what? I'm not going to read the book for you anymore. Just go to bed. And they keep coming out of bed and you keep telling them, I told you to go to bed. So go to bed, go to bed. Stop coming out. You don't listen to me. You don't behave. What just happened? I can tell you what happened. This child not only felt your stress, but they took that onto themselves. They not only felt stressed and anxious because you're feeling that way, and now they're feeling that way, and they're also starting to feel guilty based on what you have just said to them, and shaming them for being their energetic self. Because kids are balls of energy. And when we try to tell them to stop bouncing around like this energy ball all around this room and just sit still, why can't you sit still, trying to control this child, it it creates a lot of feelings and emotions that are not positive. So this child is pretty much guaranteed to then pee in their bed at night, right? Because it slows down their system. As adults, think about this. When you experience stress and anxiety, guilt or shame or overwhelm. How do you feel? Like your body, how do you feel in your body? And most importantly, your gut, because we start to feel all of that in our gut, in our stomach, right? Um, so I can tell you how I feel when I'm stressed or anxious. Diarrhea. Wow, that seems to be the go-to response for everyone's body when it's under stress. Um, it's a body way, our body's way of telling us that something is off, something is wrong. Slow down, figure out what's going on, work on it, work through it, heal through it. And this is why I wanted to bring in the children, as because we're not doing that as adults, because we were not taught to do this as children. When we um, when we educate ourselves enough to understand how stress and anxiety and shame and guilt are showing up in our children, it's our job as their caregivers, as their parents, as their guide in this life, as the wise shaman in their life, to say, wait a minute, let's see what's going on here, right? What's coming up for you? How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Because I can see that something is off, and I would love to understand it and help you to work through it. And if we did that with our children, then they would grow up and they would continue to do not just one time, but continue to do it. They would grow up doing that for themselves. But instead, what do most parents do? I was one of those parents as well. And I still experience guilt and shame from the past version of myself. But most parents try to tell their kids what to do, what not to do, stop doing this, stop doing that, and not pausing to listen to what the child has to say, what they're going through, and and acknowledging that and validating that for them, because they don't know what we know. To them, if they're told that you can't play a video game and they throw a fit and you try to tell them, stop doing that, you have no right to do that, it's just video games. And what other things that parents can say that I know we've said as well. But really recognizing that to them, their video game is like a vacation, right? It's like if you were going on a vacation and you were in the middle of vacation and I told you, that's it, you're done. You're gonna sit right here and you're not allowed to enjoy your vacation. You can't play with your friends. You can't do anything. You're gonna throw a fit because somebody else come in and told you what you can and cannot do, what you are allowed to do. And how free would you feel in that moment? Like, how free would you, Bethany, feel in that moment if I told you what you can and cannot do?
Oh, not free at all. You feel restricted, and it's kind of like, well, what do you mean? You're taking away my shine, my uniqueness. Like, yeah. So it's interesting, like, because as a parent, I notice I do it sometimes too with my son, and I'm learning to just, like what you said, acknowledge and validate him for his feelings. A lot of the time when I have outbursts or I get impatient or I overreact, it does trickle over to him and he ends up wetting his pants because he doesn't have those coping mechanisms or like the tools that I have when I feel that way and I work through it. So yeah, this is such an interesting topic. It was a really huge realization for me as well. Kind of gave me some insight on why he has these accidents and why some days he doesn't have the accidents. Cause I notice on the days where it's like, I'm cool, calm, collected most of the day and I it's like pretty stress free, we don't have accidents. But on those days where I'm having challenging day and I'm working through a lot, when my temper snaps, like he has those accidents, and it's like, okay, now I kind of at the root cause. So it helps check my behavior too, because it's like, I wouldn't want to feel that way. So why am I putting it on him to
Hmm.
feel that way? And now what I do with him is I apologize for my behavior to him. I tell him, sorry, I reacted in that way. You didn't deserve that. I'm working on myself, and I try to explain these things so he can take it with him, like you were saying, like he can learn from that and be like, oh, I could work through this. Okay. And it's more empowering that way. And it helps with acknowledgement and the validation, like you were saying.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps them to work through their feelings and emotions, right?
Yes.
And what in your experience has acknowledged when you bring up, let's say you and I are having a conversation, you bring up something that is painful to you, and by me acknowledging and validating you and your feeling and emotion, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel heard, that I matter and I'm important too. I don't have to carry around that guilt and shame anymore, because it was expressed and I was able to work through it because of that as
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. And how quickly do you find yourself moving forward after that?
Oh, pretty quickly. It's like snap of the finger. Like once I do that, it's kind of like, okay, like I'm back on track, I'm back right
Yeah.
on the path.
Yeah. So now the other way, if you brought that up to me, whatever you were struggling with, and I I told you, well, it's your fault. You should have known better, and next time you'll know what to do. How would that make you feel?
Small and not heard, guilt and shame would come up because it's like, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. Disappointment, all
Hmm.
the negative emotions would
Yeah.
come from that. Yeah, but when you think about it from that other point of view, you release all those anabolic positive emotions that make
Yeah.
it more, it makes everything more possible and less limiting.
Hmm. And how long would it take for you to move on after that
It
response?
would take a while because you then go into the victim mindset of being like, oh man. And if you don't know how to pick yourself up from that place, you could stay there pretty long as
Yeah.
well. And it could really sit there. And I've had it with my son where he'll like, I ask him, like, how did that make you feel? And he'll tell me, like, mad or sad. And I'm just like, gosh, okay. Like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way.
Hmm.
And it helps me work through it to be a better person for him and to control my emotions, because that's the only thing I can control is how I react and respond to things. So it helps me grow when I get that response as well.
And it's awesome to hear that he's able to actually name his emotions and his
Mhm.
feelings, because most kids can't. And here's the scary part: most adults can't even name what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And I'm noticing that more and more and more, the more I talk with people and the more I coach, that they're not able to not only label and name the emotion, but
Mhm.
understand what it actually means. So, what I like to do, this is where working through the shame and guilt, is I like to ask my clients, is where are you feeling this emotion in your body? Just
Yeah.
pinpoint where you're feeling it. And I mean, some people, and it's different for everyone. Some people feel it in their toe. Some people feel it in their head. Some people in their chest, in their thumb, like wherever you're feeling it, that's where you're holding on to it. And then, and then the following response will be also different for everyone. Where is that emotion coming from, right? Why are you feeling that way? And the questions I do change based on the person that I'm talking with. And sometimes I have to ask a couple of different questions just to help them work through it and identify what that is. And I always also mention checking out the emotional wheel on Google. There's different types in there. So just go to Google and find the one that suits you the most, the one that you like the most, because there are different types. I have one that I like that I use, and just really understanding what you're feeling and experiencing. It gives so much clarity. And then you can start working through it, because first you need to become aware, become aware of what it is. It's like um, this image came to mind is like if you're talking through a wall with a person, right? And you are not really connecting with the person. You're trying to figure out what it is that they want so you can help them, and you can't get around to see them to try to understand them more. So it's your job to understand what it is that they want from you, what they need from you, and what you need from them by talking, right? By working through it. And but first you need to identify on that side of the wall, um, what kind of a person is there, like male or female, right? Which also with these feelings and emotions is what kind of an emotion is there, so you can see that person as an emotion. So who am I talking to on the other side of the wall? Am I talking to guilt? Am I talking to shame? Am I talking to stress, to anxiety, to embarrassment? Who am I talking to? And once you identify who you're talking to, right, and then this is where the part of the body comes in as well, because that wall is like that part of the body. And then you can have that conversation. Okay, well, why are you feeling that way? Right? Why are you feeling guilty? And then that person on the other side of the wall will respond, because when you ask a question, an answer will always follow. So ask the question and just wait for the answer. When you get the answer, jot it down, write it down, right? And continue to ask, well, why are you really feeling that way? And write that down. Okay, well, why are you feeling that way? To each answer that you get, why are you feeling this way? Okay, that's why. Why are you feeling that way? Okay, that's why. Why are you feeling that way? That's why. And this is my favorite exercise is, asking the question, why, 7 times until you get to the deeply rooted why. And it is challenging to do. It is. But you get all of these different reasons, and they all lead back to the same thing, to the deeply rooted reason as to why you're feeling that way. And only then, once you become aware of that why, only then you can see your options of what you can do about it. It's like, okay, well, now you have it. Okay, well, now what? And then when you ask that question, guess what's going to happen? You'll get all the other responses as, okay, now I can do this, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. And then you get to choose which one do you actually want to do in that moment in time that will help you to not only work through that block, but to also heal it and potentially not have it come up again, right? And that's what you can do as an adult. And the same thing you can help your children to do.
Yeah, I agree. Because like when I started to ask myself those questions, which I learned from you, that's when everything like will click together, and it's just like, oh, oh my gosh, that's why. Wow. And you find the root cause of like what's causing it. And like you said, that's when you can finally start healing from it. Once you find that root cause. Because I know there was a couple times when we worked together and I was your client, there would be like, oh, this is the root cause. But then I'd still do the same thing because it wasn't really the root cause. I had to go deeper. That was from something else that came up. So then I need to go to the next level. Okay, that came up. Well, why? Just like what you're saying. Yeah. It's super powerful, inspiring, and empowering, and freeing as well. Those feelings come up for me, and it brings, like, us talking about this topic brings more healing to for our patients that I've been working on, for my overreacting and my anger, when it arises due to impatience and overreacting, realizing, okay, well, that's why I get angry, because I get impatient and I overreact, and then guilt and shame comes because I feel bad that I did that, because it affects everyone around me, and they look at me like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on? Like, you're fine. Like, so it's like a cycle, but you're able to break the cycle.
Yeah. And here's the troubling part about the cycle, is that the cycle is actually reinforced by people in our life. Because if you just start, here's the thing, if you start with becoming aware of your own feelings and emotions and where they're coming from, and listening to your own language and noticing the language of other people in your life and how they are talking to you and with you, you might start to recognize all the different ways of how that communication between you and another individual continues to add to your already deeply rooted guilt and shame that you have, to the stress and anxiety that you have, but essentially guilt and shame. Because and I say this because I hear a lot of people trying to, and I was one of those people as well, before I learned, the power of words, the power of language, and that they are actually extremely powerful. And to be very cautious of what you say and stuff like that, and what you think as well. So by people trying to motivate one another, it's like, I'm trying to think of an example where, let's say, here's a good one. This one I'm sure many people can relate to: drinking. Okay? Alcoholic beverages, where two friends, and one of them is working through their drinking problem, and the other one wants to but is not able to. So this one, the one that's working through it, tries to motivate the other one by saying, you drink a lot and it's not good for you, it's not good for your family, it's affecting you in so many different ways, and you can potentially mess up your family, but I know that you are so strong and so powerful, and that you're more than capable of overcoming it. You can read this book, it has helped me a lot, and it can help you. There's this great documentary I watched, it has really changed the way I perceive alcohol. And I'm going to stop right there. Okay, so what did you hear in there that might have caused someone to feel guilty or ashamed or embarrassed?
Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. I'll try to remember exactly what I said, because top of my head. So,
all right, just the gist at least. Sorry, I had a brain fart.
That's okay. So one individual that's already worked through their drinking problem and pretty much has it under control, uh, reaches out to this person and says, "You gotta stop drinking. You have a drinking problem, and it's affecting you, and it can affect your family. You can lose your family. And I know you want to, and I know you're capable of, but you need to understand that you're doing a lot of damage to your body and to your family as well. So." There's a great book, there's a great movie, you can watch that, and it has helped me a lot, so it can maybe help you, but you got to get it under control for your family and for yourself.
Guilt and shame and embarrassment too. That's what comes up. Because when you're like getting told, oh, you have to do this, it's not coming from yourself. Like once it comes from yourself, I notice, like for me, when I got told stuff in the past, I'd be like, okay, well, what are you trying to say? Like, and then anger would arise, which then brings the guilt and shame and embarrassment. So it's like going with your example, same thing probably for anyone that has a drinking problem. It wasn't their idea to, and of course they know deep down that it's going to affect the family, which will bring even more guilt and shame, because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this even more, which could potentially bring on more drinking, because they're trying to mask it, like, oh, I feel bad now I need to drink so I feel better because it makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, my heart jumps. Like it feels like a jump. It feels like a stab. It feels like it skips a beat. It's like a flare of like anxiety. Another way to explain it, when I hear certain words or phrases that are being said, because I've trained myself to become more sensitive to it. Not always a great thing. Just gonna say it. Not always a great thing because I find myself policing everyone's words in this house and in my family when they say things, because I'm trying to help them understand the effects of the words that they are using and the sentences they're using. I understand that the intention behind it is to help and support, and I'm here for you, and I'm doing my best. It comes from a place of love.
Mm-hmm.
It does come from a place of love, but that's the intention. But the result is the opposite, because by pinpointing that you have a drinking problem, you might ruin your family, you might lose your family, you might damage, and it's like you attached to what could happen, things that they already know. They don't need that. They don't need that re-vomited back to them. They know. They know. So what they want is to be acknowledged and validated that yes, I hear you. I hear that you have a problem. I understand, and I know that it's not easy to overcome it. But if you could, how would you go about it? That's it. Simple. Ask empowering, open-ended questions that get person to think and talk about it. And that's it. If you want to suggest a book, you want to suggest something, ask for permission. Mm-hmm. Right? Ask. I read this great book. Do you mind if I share with you what this book was about and what it did for me? And if they say yes, then you share. But if they say no, okay, no worries. How about a movie I watched? Right? And they'll be like, okay, well, maybe I'll be more interested in movies because some people might like books and other people might like movies. So you got to play around and see what works for them. And don't make it personal, right? Don't make it personal about that individual because it can make them feel guilty and ashamed. find a way, because chances are you might already know this individual and how they might react when you say certain things. So find a way that works best for you and for them. But the goal here is you do very little talking and they do all the talking. And the goal here is not to come to a decision or to an action plan or what you're going to do after. It's just to really talk about and release and start that healing process. And then afterwards, you can, like another day or a week after, you can check in and just ask, how did you feel about our conversation last time? Not what did you do, because that might also cause them to feel guilt and shame because like, oh my God, we talked, it was great and awesome, but I didn't do anything. How did you feel about our conversation afterwards?
Right.
And just talk about and let them talk how they felt, right? And then you can hear what they're saying and ask another question, an open-ended question that keeps them talking, because the goal is to help them get it all out. Get it all out, right? Without you pinpointing the problems and all the things that you hear are solutions as well, unless they ask you. And even when they do ask you, limit it to one or two things, right? Don't regurgitate everything back, because it overwhelms them as well, and they'll be less likely to talk to you next time. You just baby steps a little bit, but the goal is essentially for them to see you as a person they can rely on that will not be judging them, because everything else that cause the feeling of guilt, shame, and embarrassment is judgments.
Yeah.
You. That's judgment. And if you want to help anyone in your family, and we're using alcohol as an example, but that can be used with anything, any kind of addiction, whether it's Netflix, whether it's feeling sad, or whether it is, I don't know, digging holes in the backyard, or whether it is overeating, anything. There's so many different addictions that we all have. All humans have addictive personalities. We're just addicted to different things, right? We all have our own vice. Um, so I'm curious to hear what came up for you, Bethany, as I was.
Well, for me, it came up with the whole thing I was talking about, my anger that turns into that comes from my impatience and my overreacting, which then goes into guilt and shame, and then I feel embarrassed. But what really came from that was that I judge myself on it a lot. And so I need to be more kind to myself. Because I tend to be a little rough or a little hard on myself. And then that brings more guilt and shame, because it's well, why am I not doing this? I've been working so hard, but I feel like I'm back to square one, and I'm not giving myself the grace of healing, and that it takes time, and just be patient where the patience comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that revolving door. And I just really had this big, I've kind of had little bits of this realization, but it all came together with this talk that we're having today. So huge realizations for me. And now I feel like I can move through it a little bit easier. And having that realization with my son and how it affects him with his pants wetting as well, that it's not just affecting me, it's affecting everyone around me, is another big eye-opening experience, with my guilt and shame. Because it's well, he's feeling that too when he has an accident, and I'm well, why would you do that? Well, of course he's gonna be oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to. But I'm not thinking about how I'm reacting to it, how I'm responding to it, or what I did, how I was responding, or how I was acting, 5 minutes to that or 30 minutes to that. And I'm not allowing him time to kind of work through it. I'm just expecting him to, nope, okay, now you need to start doing this the way I want you to do it. And then he gets embarrassed and he has disappointment, and guilty comes from him. So it's rubbing off when I'm not meaning it to be that way. But he's still learning how to go through his emotions. Being 4, he's he's learning it all right now, and he's looking at me and Brian as his teachers to see how we respond to things. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting, I guess, you know, because Brian's totally different. He's really cool, calm, collected with stuff, and when things happen he doesn't overreact, but I tend to hit the other way of it, of that stuff. And in the past, you know, I did a work through on it, and it came down from when I was a child, and that's how my parents responded to stuff, and I carried that with me,
Mhm.
and I have been able to release it, and I really feel like now it's really starting to come together even more. But yeah, it's just powerful.
Mhm.
And it's powerful what guilt and shame does to you, you know, and like the anxiety and stress, like those are such powerful like feelings.
Yeah. But they're guides.
Yeah,
Because
and guides, exactly, and flags, you know,
yeah,
telling you, hey, something's going on, something's up, like listen to me, and if you're not going
yeah,
to listen, I'm going to go louder until you listen to me.
yeah, exactly. And then this is where people quite often find themselves sick, or their
Mhm.
body hurting, or aches in the body. That's why I always like to, in my session and conversations with people, bring it back to the body. How you're feeling, where is that showing up in your body? And very often I've noticed that when there's lower back pain,
Mm.
that the person is not aligning with their purpose. They're not aligning, especially like with their job and career, they're not aligning with what they actually wanted to do, and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing themselves. And until they shift and work through it, and most often change their jobs, or
Mm.
change the way they view their job, that's when the back pain, the lower back pain goes away. Um, Another cycle, because what you were saying reminding me of where I was going in the beginning of this conversation with, if we teach our children how to recognize the feeling and emotion and work through it, that will continue with them and go with them through their whole entire life. That will be a self-perpetuating cycle that they would be going through, which is a healthy one. But the one that most of us are familiar with is self-punishment,
Mhm.
because we were introduced to it when we were little, did something wrong, we would get punished for it. Do something else wrong, we're punished for it. So we learned that if we make a mistake, we must be punished. Whereas that is not true. There are no mistakes,
They're just learning experiences.
right? So then we continue the cycle of self-punishment, self-abuse, that when we make a mistake, we beat ourselves up for it until, you know, until we can't take it anymore. So that is a cycle that working through the feelings and emotions can actually end the self-punishment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Food for thought. And another food for thought is something that I've heard from Dr. Joe Dispenza on one of the videos that I was watching on YouTube. The one I think I actually sent to you, Bethany. It was like almost 2 hours long.
Mm.
And what he was saying, and I don't have it word for word, so I'm gonna leave it here for everyone who's interested to do their own little research on it. But I'm gonna leave it in the way that it will create a feeling and emotion. Um, and I would want you to explore that, not to take it personally, but to explore it and educate yourself on it when you are ready. So what he said was that if you find yourself being angry often, then you are addicted to anger. If you find yourself feeling anxious, guilty, or ashamed, or embarrassed, or sad, or depressed, then you're addicted to that feeling and emotion. When I heard that, my response was, what did you say? How dare you? But as I sat with it and I thought about it, it made sense. It made a lot of sense to me that we all get addicted to certain feelings and emotions, even though we don't like them,
Yeah.
but they do make us feel safe. They make us feel comfortable and familiar, which means that if you want to change it to a different one, then you got to work towards it, right? You got to work towards it. It's not going to happen on its own. And yeah, so I'm gonna leave it there.
Yeah, that honestly, that's that. I just am like, when you said that, I was just like, wow, that's so true though, because anything can be an addiction. You could be addicted to positivity. I mean, but is it serving you or is it draining you on that? And that's where I like to leave myself too,
Yeah,
like when I had that. But yeah, that's so true though. Like, that is a really good food for thought. I like that.
coming from a brain guy, right?
Yeah.
Um, he does talk a lot about the brain, and there was a lot of explanation leading up to it. So when he said it, I understood it,
Hmm.
and I, even though I was like, for a moment, I'm like, nah. And I'm like, yeah.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like the light bulbs, not just one, but many of them went up. I'm like, oh my God. We can also be addicted to so many other feelings and emotions. For me, it's feeling sad. Like I can't do it. Feeling the victim energy. I can't do it. I'm sad. I'm tired. I don't have the energy for it. I want to. I really want to, but I can't. Um, and that's exactly what happens in my head. Like this acting that you just saw, that's exactly what happens in my head. I'm like, okay, well, then you take a rest. It's okay. You deserve it, right? And then the next day I feel guilty for not doing anything the previous day, for relaxing and resting. And that is my own self-punishment cycle. There's obviously a lot more to this cycle, but this is just a little bit to help everyone to get a little bit of an insight of what happens inside my mind, and see the relation of what happens in your own mind. And I have my own tools to work through it, right? Depending on the severity of where I'm at and what's causing it, then I work through and decide how I'm going to go about it, because there's no one way cookie cutter type of a fix it all feelings and emotions, right? Because what caused me to feel guilt for not doing things the previous day for myself or for my business is going to be different from what causes you to feel that way, even though it's the same goals, the same action, the same everything, but what causes you to feel that way is going to be different, which means that what you're going to do about it to move yourself and push yourself through it. I don't like the pushing part. I like to, use something that will pull you out of it. So it's like a lifeline, right? Somebody throws you a lifeline, and helps you to pull you out, but it's not going to be anyone outside of you. It's going to be you yourself. So it's going to be different for you than what it is for me.
Right.
So at the end of the day, all of us already know and already have the tools and the knowledge that we need to work through the guilt, shame, embarrassment, depression, anxiety. We all have those tools. Just need to sit down and listen and stop being so busy. I think that's the biggest problem, is that we're all so busy. I don't have time to sit down and do this. I know I find myself in that place as well, where I know if I sit down and I just meditate, I will I will fix it all. Right? I don't like the word fix, but in this case, that's what came to mind. That's what came out of my mouth. I will fix it all, and I resist it because I still, deep down, struggle with believing in my self worth, that I am worthy to feel good. So, and I know I hear this voice in my head that tells me, "Oh my God, Yana, Don't say this. You are a core energy coach. You're supposed to be a professional. Don't tell people that you don't have your shit together. Don't tell them that you have problems. Don't tell them that you feel pain and shame and guilt and embarrassment. Don't tell them that. You have to come across as a professional, as an expert, that you don't have anything that's wrong with you. But that is a problem right there. That if I came across that way, then people will be like, I can't work with her. I can't relate to her. She won't understand me. So that is why really I wanted to have, that's just one of the reasons why I wanted to have this series of Heal the Unicorn, because, I want everyone who is on this call to feel comfortable of taking their pain, putting it right here for everyone to see and hear, and then working through it live. And something comes up, a realization, share it with everyone, just like you have been doing, Bethany, this whole entire time, ever since we started working together and then doing the calls together, because it allows everyone else to see that what they're going through is okay. It's normal. It's a different way of acknowledging and validating that they get to see what's possible. And just when and to me, that's my favorite thing, is when I feel a certain way, I feel down, I go on YouTube and I search for videos that will help me to feel like myself, empowered, right? And I listen to other people's stories or struggles or lessons they've learned, and it helps me to feel okay, to feel good, to feel better, and then to feel awesome, and recognize that I'm not the only one who's feeling that way. Because believe it or not, if you're feeling that way, I can pretty much guarantee you that in that moment you feel like you're the only one. Mm-hmm. That you're the only one who's feeling guilty, and that nobody in the whole entire world understands you. How true is that for you?
That's true. Definitely. I agree. Like during some of that stuff, and then being like, well, man, like, I feel the victim, and it's only me, I'm the only one that's dealing with it. And then like you said, you go and you search different outlets and other people's advice, and you're like, oh my gosh, I do the same thing, because it helps me feel like I'm not alone. It's like, okay, well, this is normal. This is what happens to everyone, regardless of what your job title is, or regardless of like how much you've worked through stuff. Like everyone has these feelings and emotions regardless, and they're going to come up in different ways for anyone, because we all have like our past traumas and stresses and like all this stuff that it's just normal, and it's just a part of life.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's part of being human.
Yeah.
And that's one part that I know many people wish was taken away. But I'm going to ask this question. How would your life be if all of your feelings and emotions were taken away from you and you had no control over them, that somebody else had the control and pushed the button and made you feel a certain way?
You feel powerless. Like it takes away your power.
I would say for me, it would take away my humanity.
Mm, yeah.
And I would no longer be a human. I would be a slave to the button, to whoever is in control of that button.
Right. It's like, please let me feel good right now. Like just, like, yeah, exactly. That's so true.
And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I honestly do fear that this is where the human race is going. I hear it more and more and more from different areas, from different people, that and also controlling our thoughts. So somebody would be able to control our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, which means where's the freedom?
Yeah.
And guess what? In the moments of you being yourself, you would miss all that it makes you human. You would miss feeling sad. You would miss feeling angry. You would miss feeling guilty, embarrassed, and ashamed and anxious. You would give anything to feel those bad human emotions.
That's true.
I know I would.
Right. Yeah. Cause it's like for me, all the emotions, like I was saying earlier, are like flags. And it's just like it helps you grow and learn. And without those, how are you gonna grow and learn and
Yeah.
be the best version of yourself for that day, you know?
I guess it would just be a machine.
Yeah, the robot comes to mind for me. We'd be like robots.
Yeah, following commands.
Yeah.
Somebody else does the thinking for us, somebody else does the doing for us, and we're just following through with the task. It's the most advanced AI system that there could ever be.
Right.
That's scary. Like my arms are feeling really warm right now. I've never even thought of, humans becoming the most advanced AI system in the world. Um, just pops into my mind. Um, yeah, but that's an interesting thought. An interesting way to
Yeah.
end this call too, eh?
Yeah. Get your mind going and thinking.
But
Like,
the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because this whole entire time we're talking about guilt, shame, and all of these feelings and emotions that most people don't want. And just imagine if that you didn't have them anymore. Just imagine if maybe you meditate and you can sit down and meditate and just imagine and picture yourself not having any of those beautiful, powerful, strong feeling and emotion, those feelings and emotions that actually remind you just how powerful love is.
yeah,
So if you can't experience those, how do you think you can experience love? You can,
enjoy. Yeah.
and love, joy, happiness. You
Right.
experience them in relation to the bad feelings. That's why we label these good feelings and these bad feelings, and they exist together. So if the bad ones were taken away, that's food for thought. If the bad ones were taken away, can't really experience the good ones.
Right.
You can't.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
And
like we wouldn't have any emotions. We'd be robots just going about everything and not really feeling anything about anything or anyone. And life would just be so boring.
yeah, what would be the fire
Yeah.
in
Right.
us, right? And I mean, I'm an advocate for prove me wrong. Question what I say. Question not just what I say, but question everything that people say to you, and also question everything that you've heard in your past that was said to you. Question all of the truths. Question all of the beliefs. Question everything around you. Not to be right and not to be wrong, but just curiously question and make your own assumptions, make your own interpretation, be your own self,
Mhm.
right? That's what being a unicorn is about. Not trying to win, but just really being and questioning and understanding the other person's viewpoint and not trying to get them to change their mind.
Right.
Right? So, in other words, if you believe that if all the bad feelings and emotions were taken away, that you still get to have all of the good ones, I'd love for you to not prove me wrong, but to show me the evidence in a way of what makes you believe that to be true, right? Just, help me to see the other side. At the end of the day, I'm still going to make my own opinions, but I want to see your mind. That's what it comes down to. What's in your mind, why you believe and why you think the way that you do. That's that.
Yeah.
So, I feel like there was a lot in there, but that's my feeling. So, I'm going to keep it to myself, but I'd love to hear everybody else's feelings and emotions about this podcast.
For me, it was really releasing.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and however everyone else is feeling, that's how you're meant to feel.
Yeah.
And explore it. Really explore it and check it out and see why you're feeling that way. Right? So, at the end of the day, all the feelings and emotions, they're neither good nor bad. They're just feelings and emotions. They are experiences. They are human experiences, whether we like them or not. We were just taught from a young age that when you feel this way, that's a bad feeling. You feel this way, this is a good one. So you look for this and you have this, but avoid all the bad ones, right? Avoid them, but not deal with them.
Right. Put up those walls, put up those blocks, but don't deal with them. Right. But that's just not the way to be.
No, it's not, because eventually we will be kicked at the back of our shins or knees and be forced to deal with all of the stuff that we locked up in the Pandora box. That's what I like to refer to it. Well, the Pandora box that we put everything in there and to deal with later, sometime, because I don't have time for it now. That all comes out. Just imagine the whole box opening and you being flooded with all the stuff that you've put in there. But if you were able to work through it as a child and you never put anything in that Pandora box, that's the gift that you can give to your children, right? Or to other people in your life or other children in your life, right? Be that go-to person in a way. But the go-to person also makes sure that you take care of yourself, because people can sometimes take advantage of your caregiving abilities, that they will go to you for everything and anything. So this is where healthy boundaries are very important. And those healthy boundaries that you set in place are there for you to protect yourself and not for the other person, because it's their job to do that for themselves. Right? So having said all that, make sure you have healthy boundaries in place for yourself. That's a whole different topic, which we don't have time for today. But that is also what I love to work with people on.
Yeah, it's one of your passions.
Yeah, yeah. Something that I did myself without even knowing what I was doing, until one day I'm like, oh my God, that's what I was doing. And now it makes perfect sense why I was able to heal through my panic attacks, my anxiety, my depression, my addiction to feeling sad and depressed. Because that's what I recognized, that I was addicted to it. And it was Tony Robbins that said it first. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but it triggered the realization that, ooh, he said something along the lines that if whatever you are feeling and experiencing, if it meets more than 2 of your needs, I think, or 3 of your human needs, then you become addicted to that feeling and emotion, which essentially is the same thing that Dr. Joe Dispenza said, just in a different way, with, brain explanation and helping you to connect the dots. But those are the dots that I connected to 3 years ago now. that helped me to take ownership. That's what it did, because I up until that point I believed that I had no control of my depression, and now my depression was controlling me, that there's nothing I could do. But the moment that I heard Tony Robbins say that it's an addiction, that's how I understood it, that I was getting something out of it and I was becoming addicted to what I was getting out of that, right? People coming in and helping, doing things for me. I could do less. I could, just sit there and not do anything. And so I then recognized that I have the power.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a choice. And it was up to me to do something about it. So I went about it my own way, going through it, working through it, which is a whole another journey on its own. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here talking right now about everything that we talked about.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I love this chat. It's always healing, and I always enjoy our conversations together. I look forward to them every week.
Me too. I love them, and I love having you on every Wednesday. In about 2 weeks, we should have Megan on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that will be nice and exciting. It'll be like a nice reunion. She's working 3 jobs right now, so
oof, that's a lot.
Plus doing her podcast as well, so that's a lot.
Yeah, she has a lot on her plate, but I'm proud of her. She's doing amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm inspired by how much she has done and how much she's doing every single day. But without further ado, I want to just thank you, Bethany, and I want to thank all the viewers and all the listeners for staying with us and for listening and for commenting down below and letting us know what came up for you and what you think of this podcast. And whatever platform you're on, subscribe to this podcast and make sure you have your notifications on, so that way whenever I upload the podcast, that you will be one of the first people to know and check it out.
Yeah.
So
I want to add, it's funny, both of our animals came to us at like the same time.
Yeah, this cat wasn't bugging me all day until I sat here getting ready for the call with you, and then he comes and sits. I'm like, oh my God, really? You know what's about to come. He loves the Heal Unicorn talk because it helps him to heal.
Yeah, exactly. It helps Sugar heal too. So she's like, oh, it's healing time. But anyways, thank you. And until next time, next week, next Wednesday.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.